So I'm going to start recording. All right, so this is Nuts and Bolts. This is a class that hopefully I know a lot of y'all have already been through, and it's something that I think you can go through again and again because it changes a little bit just as things evolve and what, just life changes, the industry changes, just things change about it. And so it's just one of those classes that really just, it goes through everything that I think you would need to know, from taking your licensing classes to really serving and helping a client walk all the way through the transition process and get what they need, as far as transitioning from one house to the other. So Nuts and Bolts, it's normally about a 10-week process, or we've done it in a lot of different ways. We've done it where, hey, we're going to teach it all in like 2 days. We're going to teach, 2 hours, 5 weeks. We're going to teach 1 hour, 10 weeks. So I've done it in a lot of different ways. But I think about an hour is about as much as your brain can handle before like it starts to be way too much. So I think this will work better to really just spread it out. So we'll take some time to go through. And if something that we're talking about brings up questions and you're like, oh my gosh, like I really need to know more about this, or I need to talk to Amy more about that, schedule some time with me. My link is out there at that schedulewithcornell.online, and we can go over that stuff because it's a lot. This is a lot. It's not something that you just like come out knowing. Like, it is stuff that you've got to it's meaty and you've got to kind of work through it. So don't feel bad if you watch this again and again and again. Like, I love to have YouTubes up while I'm driving just so that I can listen to it, or while I'm doing my makeup or doing stuff like that. This is a great one to just have as kind of greenfield content that you can listen to again and again. Does anybody have any questions before I jump in? Okay, well, y'all seriously feel free to unmute and jump in with questions at any point. I don't have the PowerPoint for the presentation out on Front Agents right now by design. It's a lot, like it's a really big document and all this, and it gets to be too much too, and you're really not going to go through it all. So instead, what I thought was we would just go through the presentation on here, and then at the end of the class, I'll post it all so you can go back over it if you want to, but I'm kind of changing it each week as we go too, so that it can be fresh and ready to go each week, but I haven't gone through all 10 weeks yet. So anyway, just a lot to look forward to in this world. So we're starting with buyers. I feel like for Nuts and Bolts, buyers is kind of always the place that I like to start, because most new agents are going to start with buyers when they go out. And so it's just normally that's the thing that you start with. The other thing that I think is particularly timely right now is that buyers are hard. So in the past, buyers have not been that hard. It's been like, okay, are y'all seeing, like, does that just change to buyer one? Okay, all right, cool. So in the past, buyers have not been that hard, and it was like, oh yeah, we're going to kind of go over buyers really quick and we'll get to sellers, where that's really hard in this market. Well, now we're in this market where buyers are hard. And so that's what this very first thing of buyer presentation, I was like, hey, man, what a great time to really go over and do together, because the buyer presentation in my world has changed. It's kind of become a more somber meeting, not so like, tell me what kind of yard you like. Okay, I'll get you exactly that. Like it is more of really having some really tough conversations about what it's going to look like in order for that buyer to get that house, and how are we going to walk you through from here to over here in a market that is somewhat impossible for buyers to win homes. And so through that, I updated the buyer rep presentation, which we're going to go through just so that you can see how I present it to a buyer, and then you can put your flavor on it. This is normally what I would do at an initial meeting with a buyer. So normally we're going to get a call, we're going to meet somebody at an open house, somehow you're going to get connected with that potential buyer. And then I really want to set up an initial meeting with them to really talk about all of this stuff. Now, what do they want to do? Not meet with me. And it's not because they totally don't see value in it. It's because they see that or they really are getting to, they just want to go see that house, right? They really don't want all the back end. They don't want to know all the stuff about it. They really just wanted to go see that one house. Now they are getting a little bit more comfortable with the concept right now in this market because they are seeing other friends not get houses. Like, oh, they made an offer on that and they didn't get it. They made like 5 offers and they didn't get it. And so I think they are coming around to being more receptive to this more initial meeting and really getting ready to get ready. But it's something that we've got to be proactive in telling them, hey, this is a service that I offer that I think is valuable to you. If we don't tell them that, then we're just going to walk into the first house and we're going to be off to the races. And it's not that that is terrible. It's just that it sets us up from the very beginning behind the 8 ball, where we've got to explain every little piece as we go rather than explaining it to it all at once. You're going to still have to explain it little pieces as you go, but at least you already told them once, so you don't feel like, oh my gosh, I totally missed something, or, you know, that you really did miss telling them something that was pretty important or germane to the conversation. This also sets you up as a sales professional rather than just a salesman, right? So if I'm going to go buy a new car, this isn't how we're going to do it, right? I'm just going to go in, I'm going to talk to the salesman, I'm going to get, you know, do my financing, whatever, go in, come out with a car, probably in that same day. If I am going to hire a CPA, that may be a more substantive conversation, especially if my situation is complicated, right? And so even though that CPA is kind of in a sales role because he had to get me to come in and meet with him, it still is, that's more professional services than true sales. And that's really where I think this is where we separate ourselves in this initial meeting, really setting it up to say, hey, we want to be your professional in this, and we want to help lead you through this time in your life to help you get into this house. This also does establish trust, especially when you're talking to people who you don't know. Having some time that you are like really helping to educate them with kind of no expectation of anything in return, right? This isn't something that obligates them necessarily to working with you. This isn't something that, you know, gives them, this is just a gift to them of information that they need. They need to know what's going on in this. And so to me, this is a great thing to be able to share with them as well. This also sets boundaries and expectations. I was actually texting with Haley last night. She was asking me like when she had just gotten a lead to come in on the Boomtown site, which is awesome. She's like, okay, so when do I follow up with them? It's like 8 o'clock right now. So, well, so for me, I don't return calls after 5. So I, you know, tell my clients in that meeting, like, hey, I'm here. I am going to get to you and I will get an answer back for you. But if you're calling me after hours, just know that's time that I have set aside with my family, and I will return your call, text, whatever it is, as long as it's not urgent, that next morning. And so just be prepared for that. Setting up those kind of boundaries and those kind of expectations just helps everybody go along. I mean, the clients are like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want, you know, my boss calling me after hours and wanting me to jump on things and do that kind of stuff. So yeah, that makes sense. And so if we set that up from the very beginning, it's all cool. But if we don't, and then I just don't respond to those text messages or those calls, and they're like, well, why didn't you respond? Or then if I do respond, they're like, wow, she really went above and beyond. She wasn't planning on responding at 8 o'clock at night, but she did. And so it helps kind of create that relationship from the very beginning so that you're in control of the relationship going forward. Also, this can indicate engagement in the process. If you've got a buyer lead that wants to go see that one house and they absolutely positively will not meet with you to talk about the process and get started, then that is somewhat indicative of how your relationship is going to go with that client, and where you have some gut check time to decide, is this a client that I want to go forward with or not? Is this somebody that I think will be easy to work with? Or is this going to be somebody that's going to kind of buck the system all the way through because they think that they know better, they want to go faster and easier, maybe they're shopping me versus 2 or 3 other guys, they're just trying to see who's going to show up that day, you know, whatever that situation is. If they're really willing to sit down and talk with you and spend half an hour, 45 minutes talking through this, that indicates, hey, they are ready to make us, they're ready to go. They're sticky to you. They're not going to just jump to another agent. They're really here for it. And so that's part of this too, is that I'm trying to figure out who are those people that are here for it. And then, like I said, it should be 30 or 45 minutes. Really, again, just like I was talking about with nuts and bolts, like if I start talking for an hour or more, like it's hard for a client to figure out what I'm talking about and how, you know, how that's going to go. And so I don't think it needs to be a whole lot longer than that, unless they are somebody that has a lot of questions. And y'all know different personality types are going to ask different questions, right? So if it's somebody who is fun and bubbly and, you know, just really feeds off of energy, you know, people's energy and those kind of things, it may be a very quick meeting. But if it's somebody who really wants to sit down, analyze everything, really get into the nitty gritty of it, that could be much longer. And so you've got to kind of be that, you know, kind of O type blood where you blend in with whoever. You've got to kind of be that for personality types too. And so figuring out what that is and then being that for that client in that moment. As far as where to do this meeting, and I'd be interested to hear if y'all have any ideas on this too. Y'all, we rarely had anybody do these at the office. Keela really was the rock star. She would do them all at the office. She was great at it. But most of the time, people are doing this really in the client's house, especially if they're a buy sell, and then they would be doing it in the house, or they would be doing it somewhere offsite. You know, they're either doing it at Panera or Starbucks, or doing it somewhere close by where the house is that they're going to look at, something like that. I will tell you too, in 2020, we've done a ton of these via Zoom. I mean, they work really well via Zoom. It's a great way to just put the PowerPoint up and like have a conversation about it. It's worked really well. What we would encourage you not to do is have it at a vacant house. So there is just a tendency to like, well, that's easy. You know, we're going to go see this one house anyway, and it's vacant. So I can just kind of go over what we need to go over then. Yeah, you could, but what's the deal with a vacant house, right? Other people could be coming in, so that's super awkward. It's normally dark with no furniture, like just not a real great environment that you want to be focusing on this. It's normally that you're focusing more on the house, not on this conversation. And so that's why we would really encourage, even if it's at a Starbucks or something where there are other things going on, it still would be better than doing it in a vacant house. Cool. And then the template is out there on the Facebook group. This one that I'm presented, or that I'm going to talk about today, is really just geared towards buyers. So if you had somebody who is buying and selling, you may want to use this plus the listing presentation or some sort of hybrid. But this one is really geared more towards buyers only. If you've got somebody that's the big deal, right? They're like, oh yeah, we're going to sell your house. Like that's not that big a deal, but the buy side is the big deal. Then I would use this one. Okay, so out on Front Agents, just loaded this morning, because that's how I roll, right? A fresh buyer rep presentation. I really just took what we had in the past and freshened it up for 2021 and kind of what I'm considering this new world going forward. So if you go out to Front Agents and hit the more over on the side, and then it will have a list of all the files, which if you haven't gone through there, hopefully you have. There's a lot of really good stuff out there. So feel free to go through all of those, but that buyer rep presentation is there. It's in PowerPoint form, not PDF form, so that if you want to modify it for you, feel free. Like if you want to change up and have all of your contact information, your pictures, however you want to do it, this is totally your document. You don't have to use the front buyer rep presentation. I'll just tell you, it's easy, right? So a lot of times, and I think even when I got in the business, I didn't have this. And so I spent hours and hours trying to figure out like, what do I need to have a conversation about? And how do I need to get this going? And y'all, it really doesn't have to be that hard. I will tell you, for me and Spencer, if we are meeting with somebody, maybe this is not best practice, but often we are running from another appointment into that meeting. And y'all, we pull up Facebook, click, open up this file, and then we talk directly off of that file, either off our Surface or sometimes off our phone. So it really is not something that has to be really complicated. The other reason why, and Spencer and I always start our conversation with this with the buyer, of that, hey, this is not, magical information in this PowerPoint. And I'm always willing to email it to a client too. I said, and I'll follow up with an email with it so that you have all the information in here. Really, this is more prompts to make sure that I don't forget to talk to you about something, because we can get to visiting and we can get to talking about goals, and I might have forgotten to tell you this, and I want to make sure that I don't do that. And so that's why I have this PowerPoint to go off of. And so that's where it doesn't really matter a ton, even if it is on your phone or something like that, because ultimately you're going to get them a full copy of it. And it's really just that conversation starter to make sure that you're covering all the right topics in there. Cool. Okay. Then this is also out there. This is a needs analysis. I did not freshen this up because I will tell you honestly, for us, we have not been using it as much. It's not a bad document. And I don't know if anybody on here has been using it and wants to speak up and tell us about it, but it's really just a set of pages. I think it's 4 pages right now. And it goes over different questions about what their, some of it is just content information, right? Making sure that we've got all that. But then it also has like, why are you moving? What are your preferences? What do you like? What do you not like? Spencer does a lot of time. He'll send this out to the client before he meets with them and asks them to bring it back filled in. Again, another big indication of how engaged in the process are they. And so if they bring it back, then it's like, well, they're really serious. Like they actually did what they were told. So they are probably going to buy a house. It's a great indication. If they didn't, that's not the end of the world. Sometimes it's just that they might not have had a printer and it's not the most user-friendly with printing it and scanning it. You could also put this information into a Google Doc and send it to them that way. There's a lot of different ways that you can get this information. You can just ask questions during your meeting and take notes on it too. That's really what I do most of the time. Yes, Catherine.
So this one came in really handy, just as a side note. Spencer does this really well. When he was sick with COVID, he had to hand off a client to me, and he sent me this needs analysis. And not only did it make Spencer look on top of it, it made me look on top of it, because I got to walk into this brand new client in an emergency situation. And I was like, oh, you want A, B, and C. This is what you're looking for. And it just took a lot of question out of the game.
Cool. I love it. Good. I will tell you the reason why I've been a little hesitant to use it, and maybe I should not be as kind of fear-based on this, but is that I hate for them to like write out all of their hopes and wishes and then not be able to achieve that. Like to be able to have to say like, well, I see here that you want a pool and 4 bedrooms for $250,000, and I don't have that. Like that doesn't exist in Arlington right now. And, I would need to go out to Alvarado or something like that. It's just, but those are real conversations, and we might as well have that conversation now versus later. So this is not a bad form, and it really does get everybody on the same page. The other thing too that I like about people writing out their vision is that this gets them a lot of times on the same page as a couple before they come into me. And so it helps me from a marriage counseling perspective, which y'all, it's a lot of working with buyers is doing marriage counseling. And it helps me to tell them like, y'all should take a date night or something and really really sit down and go through these questions and make sure that y'all have an idea of what you want, because it will help get everybody on the same page as they go through. So anyway. Okay, I am going to pop out of this presentation and get over to the buyer rep presentation and start going through that. So are y'all still seeing your new home awaits? Yeah, okay, cool. And Keela just joined the call. Keela, I was just bragging on you on how great you are on the buyer presentation. So I defer all things to you if you ever want to jump in and say anything, because you're really great at it. Okay, so this, like I said, I just have freshened up for 2021. And like I said, I would keep it under 30 minutes, even including conversation, if possible, maybe up to 45. All right. And so I'm going to just present it like I was talking to a client about it. So again, y'all feel free to stop me, jump in whenever, and we can talk about any of this. So I normally go over this page very quickly and say, hey, this is just the contact information for my brokerage team. If you have any questions, feel free to call them. They want to be here to help you too. You are getting the full team when you hire us, not just me. You've also got our support team. And then I just want to tell you from the very beginning, the realtor fees are normally paid for by the seller, and I will let you know if we're writing an offer on a deal that is not covered by the seller, but otherwise really don't worry about that. That has already been included when they priced the home. And then really we are here the whole time. So don't feel like you have to go to Google for questions or your, crazy uncle, anything like that. Feel free. That's why we're here. So text me, call me anytime. Like I said, I may only be available up until around 5, but still text me and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. We really want to be here to answer all those questions and be that resource for you. So don't feel bad. There are no dumb questions. Anytime during the process, let us know. And then let's talk some about big picture. So I know, y'all got referred from this person, but what overall are y'all wanting to do? How can we help you meet your overall big goals? And what does that look like? What does this end goal look like for you? And then I stop talking. So I really camp out here. I let them talk for quite a while about what they are looking for. And that's when I'm really taking notes, either on that information sheet or just in my planner or something like that, so that way I've got record of what really they have said and that I've listened to what they wanted. Then we're going to jump straight in and talk about the market a little bit. So this is still a very hot market, hottest we've seen in years. It is mainly a seller's market, and homes are they're selling in hours, not days, not weeks. So I don't know what you've heard, but this is something that when houses come in the market, we likely have to take very quick action. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in this presentation so that way you can really be prepared and not feel scared when you've got to make a quick action, that you're really confident that, hey, I've done the research, I know what I'm doing, and this is what it's going to take in order for me to meet my goal. And so buyers are really competing, and we're going to have some strategies in here of how to make your offer really stand out. And I just want you to know too, that even though we're talking about that this is really a seller's market and things are going really fast, that doesn't mean that people are just paying, or that the buyers are just paying wildly more than what the house is worth. There are some people that are paying over appraisal, but I want you to think about appraisal as, hey, that appraisal is what has happened in the last 6 months in that neighborhood. That's not necessarily indicative of what is going to happen in the next 6 months. And so we can see some numbers that, man, the appraisal right now in this moment that you're contracting, it might be low. However, it's going to catch up, and it's going to catch up pretty quickly is what we're seeing in this market. And so we'll talk through what that means and how that might impact your cash to close and some other things. But I don't want you to freak out that, oh my gosh, these houses are so expensive. They're so overpriced. I cannot believe that I would have to pay this much for that house. That's what people were saying a year ago and 2 years ago and 3 years ago, and they are making huge dollars on their homes that they are selling now. So I don't want you to come into it with fear. I want you to understand, hey, there are some really great opportunities I've got to get in at so that I can start earning those dollars like those people did 2 and 3 years ago too. All right, so let's talk about, can I qualify? So first, I want to tell you, I'm so glad that you called, and so that I can hook you up with one of our great local lenders. We work with guys that are so good at what they do, and so we want to make sure that we get you some of those names to really start the process and make sure that you're working with somebody with integrity that can really get you all the way through to closing. So that's the best thing that I can tell you with all of this mortgage information that I'm about to share, because really they're going to be the ones to walk you through all of this and make sure that everything is good on the financing side. But I want to tell you a little bit before you call them, just so that you have an idea. So they're going to be looking at your credit score. They really want your score to be over 640. And that's not based on a Credit Karma. That's more of a consumer site. They'll pull a fresh, good FICO credit report for you and give you heads up on where you stand on it. It's a great thing to do, even if you're not looking to buy for 3 or 6 months. go ahead and do that now so that you have a basis of where you're coming from. I always say it's like your cholesterol. Like, I don't know as I sit right now what my cholesterol is for today. I kind of know in general where it should be, but I need to actually get a test to say that. Same thing with this. You need to get an actual credit report to be able to say that. And so they'll walk you through that and get that going. They're going to look at your debt to income ratio, and I've shown that on this slide. It's basically all of your total household income divided by your total household debt, and that then they're going to get this ratio. And I just wanted to ask, like, do you get paid W-2 or do you get paid 1099? Because that might impact how your financing is going to go. And so I do wait to hear what they say there, just because if they are 1099, I'm going to encourage them to go through and get full pre-approval, not just a pre-qualification letter. And so full pre-approval is going to look like going ahead and turning in all the documents that the lender needs now before we get a house, just to make sure that they've calculated everything correctly and that you don't fall in love with the house, start spending money towards that house, and then are unable to close for some reason that you had no idea based on how your CPA filed your taxes, or maybe you need to restate your taxes, or maybe you need to do, there's a lot of different options. And so that's where we just need to know if you are 1099, you do need to go a little bit farther right now. Any questions on that? Anybody? Okay. And then can I afford it? I talk about when I'm talking about total payment, I'm talking about the all-in payment, the principal and interest, property taxes, homeowners insurance, and mortgage insurance. I want to make sure that that total payment is affordable for you and your family before we go, really before we even walk in the house, right? Because I don't want you to go and fall in love with the house at $300,000 and then find out, oh, that payment is a little bit too much. We really need to back it down to $250,000. So that's where your lender is going to walk you through which loan package you're going to go with. Is it going to be conventional, FHA, or VA, or our normal ones? And they're going to go over what interest rates and down payments. Interest rates are really good, and they'll have some different options on that. Your escrow account will be that taxes and insurance that you're paying in a 12th every month, so that way then you're not writing big checks at the end of the year. So that's a big part of our numbers we want to make sure that you're comfortable with. And then the mortgage insurance is if you're putting less than 20% down, then your lender will require that you have mortgage insurance. But y'all, it's really not that big a deal. Don't stress if you have less than 20% to put down, because they'll walk you through those numbers, and we'll just make sure that we count your budget accordingly when we're looking at total payment, so that way we're coming right in line with where y'all need to be. Still way better than renting. And just keep in mind though, too, if there is an HOA, that is not part of the payment that is collected by the mortgage company. That is going to be separate. And so sometimes you'll send me a property and I'll send back and say, yeah, that one's really great, but the HOA on it is, actually I had one yesterday, $415 a month. So that just really puts that payment a little more out of reach of what that client for me wanted. And so I just want to make sure I will send it to you before we ever see it, because again, I don't want you to fall in love with a house that has a crazy high HOA payment or something like that that doesn't fit the overall budget. All right, so how much money are you going to need? So you're going to need your down payment. You've probably heard about that. And like I said, there are several options in that 3 to 5%. VA even offers something for 0% if you're a veteran. And I'll kind of pause there and see if they are or not. And so that way then, just so that I kind of know which direction we're going on it. And then we'll also have closing costs. Closing costs are going to be somewhere in the $500 to $6,500 range, and it's going to have some lender fees, some title company fees. It'll have your escrow account set up. It'll have a year of homeowners insurance prepaid, and then some other miscellaneous fees. So I can't tell you what exactly it will all be. That's where your lender is going to come in, and they're going to get you a fee estimate, and we're going to really make sure that we're good on what all of that covers. So you might have heard from somebody that back in the day, they didn't have to pay those closing costs. Maybe the seller paid the closing costs for them, or they rolled them into the loan somehow, something where they weren't responsible for that. All they had to come up with was their down payment. Unfortunately, in this market, we are just not seeing that really where it's a competitive offer to ask the seller to pay for the closing costs for you. So what we are really encouraging is, hey, is there some way that you can find that cash somewhere? And I know that's tough. Like, my gosh, like I've got to come up with all this money to close. It is kind of the way that we're really seeing successful offers right now. There are some way, I mean, we could write an offer with the seller paying closing costs, but likely you might make 50 or 100 offers before a seller, a seller would kind of be desperate enough to take your offer. And then, is that really the house that you want? We just went over all these awesome things that you want in your house, and I want that for you too. And so that really means in order to be competitive, I'm going to need you to come up with the down payment and the closing costs, or maybe delay some months until you can, so that way you're really ready to go. I will tell you too, this is a time where people are shaking the branches and talking to, oh, dear Aunt Susie and grandma and anybody they can, and helping them understand how kind of severe the market is right now, and seeing if they are willing to help with any of this, because that could be a great resource too. And there are, you might have heard about some down payment assistance programs. There are some out there. I always just say it's a little awkward on a down payment down payment assistance program, because you're raising with one hand and saying, hey, lender, I can qualify. Like, I am good. I've got a good job. I pay my bills. I can buy this house. But then I'm also going to raise this hand and say, but I don't have all the money saved that I need to. And so I need some help with that. And so it does happen. Like, those programs are out there and they can help, but it is something that isn't just like super easy to get. It's a kind of thin margin of the population that qualifies for both of those things, where they qualify for the house, but they also don't make too much money, where the lender's like, no, you should already have it saved. Okay. All right. And your lender can walk you through those options too, and make sure that you know all about both of those. I wanted to talk a little bit about paying over appraisal, because we're hearing that so much in this market right now. And I want you to go ahead and know, so that way when we're going and seeing houses, you can kind of be prepared for what that looks like. So some buyers are offering to pay the seller an amount over appraisal. So like I said, the appraiser is going to come in, and they're ordered. It's somebody that the lender pays to come out, independent third party, and say, hey, this is what, based on the comps that have sold for the last 6 months, this is what this house is worth today. And then the seller, some of these buyers are saying, hey, hey, seller, yes, we're all seeing that the appraisal is $250, but I'm willing to pay you $255, or I'm willing to pay you $260, something over appraisal. Don't have to, it's just something that some buyers are doing. You can say, hey, I will pay up to $5,000 over appraisal. I'll pay up to $6,000 over appraisal, something like that. So maybe the house was listed at $250. You made an offer at $260 and told them, hey, I'm not going to pay $10,000 over appraisal, but if the house appraises for $255, then I'll pay $5,000 over appraisal and pay the $260. Okay, so there are some ways that we can do that, and we'll talk about it more as we get closer to making an offer. But what I wanted to do was show you some examples over here on the side of what that looks like, as far as what your cash would, like how that would change your cash on here. And so I just ran some scenarios at 200,000. I know you're looking at 250, but just so that you could kind of have an idea. And so this first one shows a sales price at 200,000, an appraisal at 200,000. And so that is good. Like we don't have any shortfall. We're good on it. So if you were putting 5% down, that would be 10,000. Your loan amount would be 190, and then your closing costs would be, let's say, 5,000, just for round number's sake. And so you would pay your 5% down and your closing cost of 5,000. So your total cash would be 15,000 for that house. In the bottom scenario, it's the same house, but the appraisal is short. So let's say we offered 200,000, the appraisal only came in at 190. And so we've got a $10,000 difference there. If I do 5% down, that 5% down is now based on the 190, not the 200. And so it drops a little bit to 95. And then the loan amount drops to 180, 500. Closing costs the same at 5,000. Now that means that I owe an additional 10,000, but it was a little bit lower on the down payment. And so my total cash due is $24,500. Now, the good news on that scenario is that my loan amount is lower. So my payment is going to be a little bit lower, but not a lot lower, because it really isn't a huge change on the payment side when you factor it out for 30 years. The big difference is that cash. And so I want you to be prepared for that. If you make an offer over appraisal, it is really impacting how much money you have to bring to the table. So just know that. So, and we can talk about it more as we get closer to it, but I just don't want you to think like, oh yeah, I'll pay over appraisal, I'll do whatever, and that the lender will do that. That's really what is happening, is that the lender is limiting and saying, hey, I'm only going to loan up to that appraised value. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on that part? So this is a new slide. We haven't done this one before, so I'm hoping it makes sense. All right. So then I went and added another slide on competitive offer options. So I said, so we're talking a lot about how hard it is to get a house. And so I just want to give you kind of a heads up of what it looks like right now and what are some options of how you can make your offer more competitive. Because we are seeing on so many of the houses in your price range where there are 10, 15, 20 offers per house. Now, if there's 10, 15 offers per house, what does that mean for you as the buyer? Well, that means likely you're going out and making 10, 15, 20 offers in order to get one house. Okay. That is not a really fun situation for anybody, really. And we want you to get the house that you want. And so when it comes to the house that you want, we want to make sure that your offer is very competitive against the others. And so these are some things that you might want to start thinking about how this is going to go. This is not what your parents did. This is not what we were doing even 3 years ago. This is a different kind of market that we likely think will be around for the next 5 years. And we want to make sure that you're prepared when you go in and really make that good offer. Now, just like I said, the market is coming up so fast that being a homeowner is such a great thing. And you're going to continue to grow your equity the longer that you're a homeowner. And so that's why we want to get you in now, even if we've got to do some of these things that are a little aggressive to make sure that your offer gets accepted. Okay, so one of the things that you can do, just like we talked about, is pay over appraisal. Another thing you can do is really up your down payment. That may or may not be possible, but sometimes taking money out of like an investment account or a 401k account can really make your offer look better because you're putting more down. And if you're a 20% down option and everybody else is 3 to 5% down, then that could make your offer stand out. Just know we're probably competing against cash as well. And so we've got to make it all over the whole offer really something that is attractive to the seller so that they will accept us going forward. And so a lot of times that is about money, and that's where that pay over appraisal potentially really comes into play. Another option that, this is a little aggressive, but it does potentially make your offer really stand out, is going with a higher option fee or no inspections. So traditionally our option fee is this time period where we pay the seller to have their house off the market and we as the buyer come in and do inspections on the house. Reality is right now, because there are so many offers on each house, is that the seller is really not doing much repairs. Used to be that we would do an inspection and then we go back and say, okay, seller, I want you to fix all of this. Well, you can kind of imagine how that's going to go right now. If we were one of 10 offers, even if we were selected, likely the seller is not going to be super excited about doing a whole laundry list of repairs. So really it makes that inspection period more of a time to just double check to make sure there's no major items that we didn't know about that were really upset, things that big ticket items that we needed to prepare for. So what I've seen a lot of consumers do with success is go higher on their option fee. So still, let's say that we need to have those 5 days that we can back out for any reason. So we'll keep the number of days there, but instead of just offering the seller $100 for those 5 days, maybe we offer them $1,000. Now that $1,000 is not refundable. So if you decide to move and go to a different property, or you decide the repairs are too much on this house or whatever, you've lost that $1,000 and the money that you've paid to the inspector, but you knew before you bought something that you were not comfortable with. So that is an option. Or some of our clients are really going aggressive and saying, hey, I'll just take the house as is. You're living in it right now. It must be kind of okay. I'm just going to go ahead and take it and take the risk of that. I don't love that as an answer because I want you to get, be as protected as possible, but I also want you to get the house that you want. And so whatever it takes to get that, that's where I need you to come in alongside me and look at some of these and say, okay, I could do this, but no way I could not do that, and that way then you can make a decision and really be in the driver's seat for this. Another option that we've seen is people going with no financing contingency. I will tell you too, that's where it comes back to working with some of our strong local lenders that we partner with. Those lenders can really check everything before we get to the contract point to really make sure that everything's okay. If you're considering doing this, I would go ahead and get them all of your paperwork now. Tax returns, paycheck stubs, your old lease, whatever they need, go ahead and get it. They can get you through underwriting where really all they need is an address to go through. And so then you can more comfortably go in with a no financing contingency because, hey, you are approved. Like they've already done all the work on it. And that does make the seller feel a lot better where your offer becomes more like cash because you've waived the financing contingency. So that is an option as well. Home warranty, we haven't talked about yet, but a home warranty is something that normally covers the house the first year that you're in the house. And it's somewhere between $400 and you can kind of spend whatever you want to on it, but normally $400 and $600. And we would traditionally have asked the seller to buy you a 1-year home warranty so that way you had coverage in case something broke. Well, instead, if you pay for that, then that makes your offer look a little bit better because the seller's not paying that on your behalf. So that could be an option. And then really closing, we are seeing very few closings stretch out. We really want to make it where we're closing within 30 days. Now, if it is an occupied property, we may need to negotiate with the seller on maybe giving them some lease back so that they have time to go out and shop for a house, but they still want you to close so that they can make sure that you're going to go forward, that there's no issues or anything like that, it's kind of wrapped up and they've got their money in their account. So plan on something on closing within 30 days. Does anybody have any questions on any of those? Oh, yes. Then I have quick clean offers. Yeah.
If they decide to go with no inspection, is there's something that they need to sign for that?
There's part of the buyer rep package is that for your protection, get an inspection form. So I would have already had them sign that as part of the buyer rep package, but I wouldn't have them sign anything else. I think you're okay on that. It just is, it's a risky deal.
So if you say no inspections, does that mean you're literally not getting an inspection, or does that mean you can have the inspection, you're just not going to ask them for any repairs?
For me, it would mean really literally no inspection. If the buyer wants an inspection, I would really encourage them to just go heavy with the option fee then and have an option to back out, because otherwise, it's almost worst case scenario. You go and do the inspection, you find out that the house has fallen down, and then you don't have an out. Which you do, but you don't. I mean, y'all know there's so many outs for buyers in the contract, just subcategory of the buyer presentation. There are a ton of outs. And so in theory you could get out, but I would say if they want to do an inspection, just go heavy with the option fee and go ahead and do the inspection. And then they would have the ability to back out if something crazy happens.
So if they're not doing an inspection, do you even need an option period?
No. So if they're not doing an inspection, then I would go $0 option, 0 days option, no option. Okay. So, and it'll make your offer stand out, but it is riskier. And so that's where really it's just starting this conversation as part of the initial buyer conversation, right? Which y'all, we haven't done this before. This is a new slide too. We have not really gotten deep with talking about this stuff up front. And this is too much for a buyer to handle, right? Like you're going to start talking about all this stuff and they're going to be like, what the heck are you talking about? Like, what? I've got to do this? How is this possible? And so they may not be able to wrap their head around any of it, but at least you've kind of planted the seed. You've had a little bit of conversation about it. So then when you go out and show that first house, you can have another conversation about it before you write that offer. Then if you go and lose that house, likely, right? And then write an offer on another house, lose that house, then you can go back to, remember in that buyer consult where I was talking about how we could really make the offer more aggressive? Let me pull out that slide. Let me show it to you. This is what we talked about initially. What do you think would be a good option for you to make your offers differently on the next house that we find, so that that one really sticks and that that's the right house for you? Sometimes people just have to fail a few times before they're able to take in something like this. Other consumers may be like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you told me this, because I would have died if I didn't get that one house that I love, 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 love. I mean, y'all, Spencer had one this weekend that this house, had a ton of offers on it. And so many tears on the phone of clients that did, or not clients of ours, clients of other agents, where they are so angry because they didn't get it. They made these crazy high offers, all this stuff, and they didn't get it because not everybody can get it. There's only one house. You can't give it to all 15 people that made an offer, whatever. And so it is really helping the consumer understand from the very beginning, rather than like, oh, well, that's Brady's fault. He didn't write that offer right, and that's why I didn't win that house. No. Like, I told you from the very beginning what it was likely going to take in this market to do it. And I think it just sets you up where you're not the bad guy. It's just the market. And these are some ideas and some tools that if they want to do it, then they could.
I have a
Amy?
question.
Amy, I've got a question as well. Go ahead.
So Amy, do you think it's, when making an offer, because we did my cash customer or client did 10,000 over asking price. Do you think it's wiser to go over asking price or over appraisal price? Or what do you think has more, I guess, what would be more lucrative to the seller, what they're looking for?
So that's a great question. I really think it's a combination of both, but if you're going to go well over asking price, and you're not including an appraisal waiver or, some sort of appraisal guarantee of something, then it's basically, you could write it for 2 times what they have it offered for. It doesn't mean anything. You can go up to whatever number you want, but it doesn't mean anything until you have an appraisal guarantee with it. Really just from a seller's perspective, because if they're not willing to, it's not like the listing agent could have listed it for higher. They're listing it for what it likely will appraise for. And so if that person puts an offer 10,000, 15, 50, y'all, that's what we're seeing right now. These crazy offers over. Well, if they're not willing to back it up with some sort of guarantee, then it's not really, it's just funny money anyway. It's not actually going to close out at that. And so then, we're presenting offers. We're like, yeah, there's this one over here, but it's not going to price for that. And they're not willing to do a guarantee. Now on cash, it doesn't have, there's no appraisal. So that's right. Totally different. But on a financed, I would want to see an appraisal guarantee.
Right.
Bev, did you have something?
Yeah, go over again what you just said about if you forego the inspection, that takes away the option period? Am I understanding that correctly?
Right. So the buyer would just be no option. They're just taking it. They get the seller's disclosure, but that's all they get.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Crazy to think about. Really, it's crazy. Now, I will tell you, when I got into the business, we didn't have option fees and we didn't have option periods. We didn't have this so it's not that, oh my gosh, this is it's never been done before. It's just been a long time since we've even considered buying something without really having a full inspection done and really having the opportunity to back out, especially when you're making these offers and you just saw it for, the 15-minute window that you had to see the house. And now you don't have the opportunity to back out if you decide you don't like it or you want to go to another property or whatever. You know, I mean, you're all in at that point. But that's what the seller wants to see, right? You know, they want to see that you're all in on it. So, okay, let me go on and just finish this up. So new construction, this is just saying that we represent buyers on new construction too. Just wanted to reiterate that and make sure that you don't have a buyer that ends up walking into a new construction and didn't know that you could help them with that too. So make sure they know about that. Looking online. So we have a way to do personalized web searches and really drill down for what you want. This information that you gave me on the needs analysis was great. Now I can take this and go back and create a search and really tailor it. And I'll be watching the search. You should be watching the search too. And as properties are hitting the market, we're knowing about them real time so that we're able to go and schedule appointments very quickly to go see them. Then seeing them in person, usually in this market, we're going to be seeing one. You know, it's not really the same way that it was years ago where we would go and see 5 or 6 on a Saturday morning and then pray about it and think about it and then make an offer on Monday. It's more of that a house got listed, we need to go and see it within the next, 15 to 24 hours. And then we need to make sure that we have an offer submitted very quickly after we see it if it's something that you're interested in. So I want you to really be prepared to act very quickly, but also to be very confident that you're doing the research now to make sure that that's the right house. This isn't something that, you should need a lot of time to consider because you've been looking online, you're ready, you know your numbers. We're going to really make sure that you're ready to go before you're making those offers. So timeline, I know we've already gone over some of it, but just wanted to go over briefly what that looks like. And so the first part of the timeline is we're going to be showing houses, you're going to get offers submitted, and we'll negotiate those offers. Unfortunately, there is kind of a loop on that until we actually get something accepted. So I'm hoping that you're getting the first house that you're really interested in, but it depends on how competitive and aggressive we make that offer. So just know, I'm always telling people, don't put it on Facebook. Don't tell your mom or, all your best friends, oh my gosh, I'm buying this house on Lily Lane. It's so cute, because we may not be if we are, doing these other offers on some things. Then we'll get down to the contract being executed. And when the contract is executed, you will need to deposit earnest money to the title company, and then option fee will be paid to the seller, but via the title company. And normally that's going to be around 1% of the price for the earnest money and around 10% of the earnest for the option. But like I was saying, we may need to plan on some more money for option to really make the offer aggressive. So just know that that's something that we can play around with. Days 1 to 7, somewhere in there is going to be the end of your option period. And so we would want to make sure that your inspection is done during that time period if you're choosing to inspect, and that we get all of any repairs that you want the seller to do fully negotiated by the end of that. Like I said, I don't want to set you up for a disaster here. They may not do any repairs, but they might. And so we want to make sure that we're going over all of that there. And then after that is normally when the appraisal is going to get done. And I know you're saying, well, but Amy, you were saying I'm going to pay maybe $5,000 over appraisal or something like that. How do I not know about it until then? Well, unfortunately, it's just the process that the lenders go through to get it. And it does take some time to get an appraiser out there. We would just wait to see what that appraisal comes in at and then figure out the numbers from there if the contract was somewhere out of line. So let's say that the appraisal came in lower than what we had planned on. Or something. And so we may need to adjust after that and go back to the seller and see what options there might be. And then normally closing is going to be around day 30. And then at closing, the rest of the money will be due. So make sure that you're prepared for that. And that's why we're going to get those numbers from that local lender. They'll definitely be talking to you about it before then. And then we'll have funding and possession. Like I said, funding, possession is normally at funding. If the house is vacant, we may need to offer a little bit of a lease back if the house is still occupied, and we'll work with you on that when we get the right house. So pricing, just know there is that asking price that's out there listed. That is just a number that the seller came up with based on what comps are out there. They don't really base it on that tax assessed value. What they're really looking at is the competitive market analysis. And part of the benefit that I provide for my buyers is before you make any offer, I'm going to do the same competitive market analysis to make sure that you've got at the best pricing information and what is likely going to be an appraisal, or what will likely be the lender's appraisal, so that you can make a realistic offer. So just know we're going to be looking at that, and we're going to be giving you some advice and opinion throughout the process to get you where you're able to make the best choice going forward of what you want that contract offer to be. And so when we're writing an offer, just know we'll need to decide on offer price, if you're going to pay over appraisal, if you want to ask them for any non-realty items or offer to buy any non-realty items from them. So those would be things like washer, dryer, and refrigerator. Normally oven, stove, I'm sorry, I guess that's the same thing. Oven, stove, and a microwave, dishwasher are going to be considered built in, and they're going to come with the property. You would need to have your loan decided on and what lender you're going to use. And then we would need to decide on close date and then possession date. And then overall, I just need to know how strong or weak you want your offer to be. Like if you're just wanting to float something out there and see if they would take it, or if you're like, oh my gosh, I will die if they don't take it. I need to know, like, that's what I need to know. Are you okay if we lose this house or not? And so that way I can advise you best on what other strategies we might want to do, kind of like what I talked about earlier in the presentation. And so really the plan going forward before we're seeing houses in person is that you need to go talk with your lender and really get that pre-approval letter and the fee estimate, so we can make sure we're all on the same page with that as far as payment and total cash to close would be. And then we're going to start looking at that website and saving favorites. And then we'll start jumping in and looking at some houses that are listed and really be ready to write an offer even from that first house that we walk into. All right. So what questions can I help with? So that's really where I go to that and go in and say, okay, you know, what can I help with? How can I go forward? I'm gonna stop my sharing there. Okay. So what do y'all think? Questions or things about the buyer presentation? Do you like the changes that we made?
No, I like it. I've been waiting for the new 2021. So.
Good.
Because I use this a lot, and I'm like, so just ignore the 2020.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, you can download it and make whatever changes too, but this one is a more aggressive change than what I normally do. I normally just like change the dates and then go on, but this one is a bigger.
I like that you changed or added that whole section because it has become such an aggressive market.
Yeah.
For the unfortunate buyers. It's so, I mean, and this is like in just a short period of time. I mean, I never would have figured.
Yeah. And hopefully this is a blessing for
January,
them.
February. So crazy.
Yeah. And hopefully this is a blessing for them, for somebody to actually tell them the real world of what's going on, because that's the thing. I mean, I don't know what's happening in other shops. I don't know what's happening with some of these other buyers, but it's like this shock and awe of so many buyers that are losing out on houses. And they're like, I just can't believe this is happening. Well, I can after what we're seeing. And so by helping them understand right from the beginning, like, this is going to be tough. This is not just the same where we just go and get to pick, oh, well, this one is painted white and this one's painted yellow. Which one do I like better? Like, I mean, you really have to go ahead and make some pretty big decisions pretty quickly on it. Or you're not going to be in the market. So,
hey, so I really liked, I guess it was a week or so ago, you talked about being creative with how you can give the seller money without it affecting the sales price or the appraisal.
Yeah.
Can you kind of speak on that a little bit more, and maybe if anyone else has had success giving money in other creative ways, if they could jump in, that would be great.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of what we were talking about there. Were we talking about non-realty, like pumping up some money there for the seller? So,
yeah.
And I think that is a good way. So a lot of times the seller has, you know, a fridge or multiple fridges on site and a washer dryer or other furniture, you know, the stuff that fits that house really well, but they probably are not going to see the same value out of in the next house. I know when we sold, we left our dining room table and 10 chairs and fridge. Like we left several things that, man, they just fit right in that house. So if you are writing your offer with a non-realty items addendum and you can put in some dollars there, then that can be something good for the seller, because that is money that would go to them. However, it's kind of the same as paying over appraisal, because it is additional cash that is coming from the buyer over to that. And so there are a lot of ways to do, like buyer paying title, I see all the time now, and that's fine, but it does increase that closing cost number, right? So instead of that $500 to $6,500 number, well, now we're at, you know, $600 to $8,500 because we just paid for an owner title policy on top of it. Same thing with the home warranty or whatever. There are a lot of ways it just does potentially impact the cash. And so paying over appraisal could be the same thing too. But I might have been more creative and had some better ideas, if y'all want to refresh my memory on it, or if y'all have other ideas too.
Did you record that session, Amy?
Yes. Yeah, I'll put it out on YouTube. Yeah. Any other questions or things y'all are thinking about? So I was thinking that we would get all the way through buyer presentation preparation today, but I did not. So we'll go ahead and close it out now. And that's what we'll start with next time, is getting into zip forms and how to prepare the actual documents of working with a buyer and then getting those signed. And then we'll also talk about lenders and what, like how to interview a lender, how to figure out a best like partner, and how we can best advise on that side.
Will that be Tuesdays at 10?
Tuesday at 10, yes. Yeah. Any other questions or anything? Okay, well then we'll leave it there. I'm so glad all y'all signed in, and we'll do it again next week. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.